guys, getting ready to start on chapter 4. Now, remember what was happening at the end of chapter 3 was that the father wasn't talking about anything, but each night he worked on the new spear he was making. And we kind of were curious about that. What kind of spear? Why was he making a spear then? And would he end up getting the money he deserved for his village? Or would that alute those alute hunters take what they wanted and then just leave with no regard for what they owe? So let's see what it says. Chapter 4, we start on page 19. The alutes left on a sunless day. Out of the north, deep waves rolled down upon the island. They broke against the rocks and roared into the caves, sending up white sprays of water. Before night, a storm would certainly strike. Not long after dawn, the Aleuts took down their skin tents and carried them to the beach. Captain Orlov had not paid my father for the otter he had killed. So when the news came that the hunters had packed their tents, all of our tribe left the village and hurried toward Coral Cove. The men with their weapons went first, and the women followed. The men took the trail that led to the beach, but the women hid themselves among the brush on the cliff. You can almost see them, right? The cliff is way up high, and they're up there, and they're watching down on the beach. Eulepe and I went together far out on the ledge where I had hidden before when the hunters first came. She has her favorite spot, doesn't she? The tide was low, and the rocks and the narrow beach were scattered with bundles of otter pelts. Half of the hunters were on the ship. The rest were wading into the water, tossing the pelts. Remember the pelts, the skin and the fur that they're going to make coats and blankets out of. The Aleuts laughed while they worked as if they were happy to leave the island. My father was talking to Captain Orlov, and I could not hear their words because of the noise the hunters made. But from the way my father shook his head, I knew that he was not pleased. He's angry, Eulepe whispered. Not yet, I said. When he's really angry, he pulls his ears. Think he does that? The men who were working on the canoe had stopped and were watching my father and Captain Orlov. The other men of our tribe stood at the foot of the trail. The boat went off to the ship filled with otter. As it reached the ship, Captain Orlov raised his hand and gave a signal. When the boat came back, it held a black chest which two of the hunters carried to the beach. Captain Orlov raised the lid and pulled out several necklaces. There was a little light in the sky, yet the beads sparkled as he turned them this way and that. Beside me, Eulepe drew in her breath in excitement, and I could hear cries of delight from the women hidden in the brush. But the cries suddenly ceased as my father shook his head and turned his back on the chest. The Aleut stood silent. Our men left their places at the foot of the trail and moved a few steps and waited. Watched my father. One string of beads for one otter pelt is not our bargain, my father said. One string and one iron spearhead, said Captain Orlov, lifting two fingers. The chest does not hold that much, my father answered. Well, there are more chests on the ship, said the Russian. Then bring them to shore, my father said. You have 105 bales of otter on the ship. There are 15 here in the cove. You will need 3 more chests the same size as this. You know what a chest is, right? It's like a big box, like It would hold all your clothes in just one chest. It would hold everything, all of your clothes. It would even hold maybe a blanket and a pillow. It would be that big. Captain Orlov said something to his aleuts that I could not understand, but its meaning was soon clear. There were many hunters in the cove, and as soon as he spoke, they began to carry the otter pelts to the boat. Beside me, Ulysses was scarcely breathing. Do you hold your breath when you get scared? I kind of do. Do you think that he'll give us the other chests? She whispered. I do not trust him. When he gets the pelts to the ship, he may leave. It is possible. The hunters had to pass my father to reach the boat, and when the first one approached him, he stepped in his path. The rest of the pelts must stay here, he said, facing Captain Orlov, until the chests are brought. The Russian drew himself up stiffly and pointed to the clouds that were blowing in toward the island. I load the ship before the storm arrives, he said. Give us the other chests, then I will help you with our canoes. Captain Orlov was silent. His gaze moved slowly around the cove. It means he looked slowly because gaze means to look at. He looked at our men standing on the ledge of a rock a dozen paces away. He looked upwards towards the cliff and back at my father. Then he spoke to his aleuts. I did not know what happened first, whether it was my father who raised his hand against the hunter whose path he barred, whether it was this man who stepped forward with a bale of pelts on his back and shoved my father aside. It all happened so quickly that I could not tell one act from the other. But as I jumped to my feet and Eulepe screamed, and other cries sounded along the cliff, I saw a lying figure lying on the rock. She saw somebody and they were laying on the rock. It was my father, and blood was on his face. Slowly, he got to his feet. With their spears raised, our men rushed down across the ledge. A puff of white smoke came from the deck of the ship. A loud noise echoed against the cliff. 5 of our warriors fell and lay quiet. Felipe screamed again and flung a rock into the cove. It fell harmlessly beside Captain Orlov. Rocks showered into the cove from many places along the cliffs, striking several of the hunters. Then our warriors rushed in upon them, and it was hard to tell one from the other. Ulysses and I stood on the cliff and watched helplessly, afraid to use the rocks we held, lest we injure our own men. Wow, that got exciting. A lot scared. I got a lot scared, did you? Sometimes when I read a book, I can kind of see the picture in my head. I hope you can too, because it's a really good book. So, what's happened is those guys that own the ship, they weren't going to pay their debt. They weren't going to pay all of it. It would be like if I told you I was going to give you a whole big box of Hershey bars, and then I gave you 2 Hershey kisses instead and kept the other chocolate. Would that be fair? Would you be angry? Yeah. So everybody was angry. The people who were owed money were angry, and the people who were trying to get away without paying for their debt, well, they were angry too. They didn't think they should have to pay for what was truly theirs. But it isn't theirs, is it? No, they didn't own that island. All right, you guys. I love getting to read to you at night. It's like I'm reading it as a bedtime story, and you wake up and read it as a good morning story. I'll see you tomorrow. You sleep good.